My beloved child, hear this with a trembling heart, because what is being revealed right now is not ordinary, and it is not meant for everyone. This is a once-in-a-lifetime warning. Archangel Michael stands in divine authority, and Jesus himself is speaking with urgency, saying, "You are not listening." Heaven has been calling you again and again, through signs, through delays, through sudden emotions you could not explain. But now the voice is sharper, clearer, and heavier than ever before. Something critical has shifted in the spirit realm. The doors that were gently knocking are no longer tapping softly. They are shaking. And this message is not about fear, it is about time. Very little of it remains. You were supposed to notice the patterns by now. The repeated moments where you felt pulled to pause. The interruptions that saved you from making a decision that would have cost you everything. Those were not coincidences. That was heaven trying to reach you. Archangel Michael steps forward with a sword not raised in violence, but in warning. His presence carries authority, protection, and truth. He is not here to comfort you today. He is here to wake you up. Because Jesus says there is a danger in delay. Not a danger that comes from God, but a danger that comes when a soul keeps ignoring divine instruction. Listen carefully. There is a reason the same message keeps finding you. You scroll, and it appears. You try to distract yourself, and it returns. You say later, but later keeps getting louder. That is because heaven is running out of ways to reach you gently. This is the final layer before silence. Jesus is not angry with you, but he is firm. He says you have confused patience with permission. You thought because nothing collapsed immediately, you had more time. But mercy should never be mistaken for approval. The delay you are living in right now is not neutral. It is loaded with consequence. Archangel Michael reveals that there was a moment recently when a door almost closed permanently. You did not see it. You felt tired, distracted, emotionally numb. But in the unseen realm, heaven intervened at the last second. That intervention was costly. And heaven does not repeat the same rescue endlessly when the message is being ignored. This is why the tone has changed. Jesus says, "I have been whispering, but you kept waiting for a shout. Now the shout has come. There is a decision in front of you that you keep postponing. It involves obedience. It involves letting go. It involves stepping away from something that feels familiar but is quietly draining your spirit. You already know what it is. That is why your heart is beating differently right now. Archangel Michael says the issue is not that you do not hear God. The issue is that you hear him, and then you negotiate. You explain. You delay. You wait for a sign that feels more comfortable. But heaven is not asking you to feel comfortable. Heaven is asking you to move. This message is urgent because there is a narrowing window. Not for salvation, God's love is vast too, but for alignment. There are assignments tied to your obedience. There are people connected to your yes. And when you stall, they stall. When you hesitate, chains remain unbroken that were meant to fall through you. Jesus says, "I am not withdrawing my love, but I will not force my voice." This is what it means when heaven may stop trying to reach you. Not abandonment, but respect for your repeated refusal to respond. Silence does not mean God left. Sometimes it means he has already spoken enough. Archangel Michael shows an image of a clock without numbers. Because this is not about dates, it is about moments. You only have a few moments left to choose responsiveness over resistance, to choose surrender over control, to choose obedience over comfort. Do not misunderstand this. This is not condemnation. This is rescue wrapped in urgency. If heaven did not care, you would not be hearing this. The fact that this message has found you proves that grace is still active, but grace is calling for movement now. Jesus says there is peace waiting on the other side of your obedience. But peace cannot follow disobedience. Protection cannot cover what you refuse to release. Archangel Michael stands guard, but he guards paths that are walked, not avoided. This is why you must listen now. Not tomorrow. Not after one more distraction. Not after one more excuse. The longer you delay, the quieter the signal becomes, not because God is cruel, but because He honors your choices. Take a breath. Still your thoughts. Let this land. Because what comes next will clarify exactly what heaven has been trying to tell you all along, and once you hear it, you will never be able to say you didn't know. My precious one, let your spirit lean in now, because the atmosphere around this message is tightening, not to trap you, but to focus you. Archangel Michael is not speaking in riddles here. He says heaven has already marked the moments you ignored, not to accuse you, but to reveal a pattern you must finally confront. You have been receiving guidance, but you filtered it through convenience. You felt the nudge, but you waited for perfect conditions. And now Jesus speaks plainly. Clarity has already been given. Courage is what has been missing. There is a reason your peace has felt unstable. It is not because God withdrew. It is because your soul knows you are standing at the edge of obedience, yet refusing to step forward. Archangel Michael reveals that hesitation has become a habit, and habits, when left unchecked, quietly turn into strongholds. This is why heaven is speaking with urgency now. Not later. Not eventually. Now. Jesus says something that must settle deep inside you. Delayed obedience still delays blessings. You keep asking for confirmation, but confirmation already came through repetition. The same message showing up through different voices. The same inner conviction returning when you try to silence it. The same discomfort when you compromise. These are not coincidences. They are confirmations you chose to overlook. Archangel Michael shows an image of a door that is open, but only halfway. You keep peeking inside without entering. You want assurance without surrender. But heaven does not operate on partial trust. Protection follows alignment, not curiosity. And right now, heaven is waiting to see if you will finally move with intention. Jesus says you are not being rushed. You are being reminded. Reminded that every calling has a timing. Reminded that every assignment has a window. And reminded that spiritual opportunities do not wait forever just because someone is afraid to step into them. Fear has been disguising itself as wisdom in your life, and heaven is exposing it gently, but firmly. This is where you must decide how you respond. Will you keep consuming messages without applying them? Will you keep nodding while remaining unchanged? Archangel Michael says heaven is watching for action, not agreement. Agreement without action does not transform anything. And now listen carefully, because this is important. If this message is stirring something inside you, do not keep it to yourself. Engage with it. Let it move through you. When you like this message, when you share it, when you leave a comment declaring that you are listening now, you are not supporting a video. You are making a spiritual statement. You are telling heaven, I am responding. And when you subscribe and stay connected to this channel, you are choosing to remain under a flow of reminders that keep your spirit awake. Do not underestimate the power of simple obedience in small actions. They align your heart more than you realize. Archangel Michael says many people miss divine moments because they stay silent when they should respond publicly. Your voice matters more than you think. Your engagement is not random. It is alignment. And alignment invites clarity. Jesus now addresses the weariness you have been feeling. He says it comes from inner conflict. Part of you wants to obey fully. Another part wants to stay comfortable. Attention drains you. Obedience brings rest, even when it feels challenging at first. Delay brings exhaustion. This is why you feel tired even when you have not done much. Your spirit is tired of waiting. Archangel Michael stands beside you, not ahead of you, not behind you. He says heaven is not dragging you forward. Heaven is standing with you, waiting for your step. The protection you keep asking for is already prepared. It activates when you move. Jesus asks you a question that echoes in your heart. How many more times do you need to hear the same instruction before you trust that it is truly from me? That question is not meant to shame you. It is meant to free you from endless delay. And hear this clearly. This is not the moment to scroll away distracted. This is where the message deepens, and what comes next will connect the dots you have been struggling to understand. Stay with this, because clarity is unfolding layer by layer, and you will recognize yourself in what is about to be revealed. Archangel Michael says the next phase of this message will expose why heaven has been so persistent with you specifically, and what changes the moment you finally say yes without conditions. Beloved soul, receive this gently but firmly, because the weight of this moment is holy. Archangel Michael speaks again, and this time his voice is calmer, but more serious. He says the reason heaven has been repeating itself is because something irreversible was approaching without your awareness. Not to destroy you, but to divert you permanently if you stayed distracted. Jesus now reveals that what felt like pressure was actually protection, trying to get your attention before a spiritual crossroads passed unnoticed. You have been standing between two frequencies. One pulls you upward into obedience, clarity, and purpose. The other keeps you busy, emotionally occupied, spiritually delayed. Neither force you. Both waiting for your choice. Heaven never violates free will. It only illuminates consequences. And now the illumination has become unavoidable. Archangel Michael shows a vision of oil being poured, but the vessel keeps tilting away. Not because it is empty, but because it is undecided. Heaven does not pour into indecision endlessly. Not because God withholds, but because spilling oil is not stewardship. Jesus says, I need you positioned, not just willing. There is something deeply important you must understand now. The warning is not about heaven giving up on you. It is about heaven shifting its method. If you ignore instruction long enough, God allows the lesson to teach what his voice was trying to prevent. That is not punishment. That is maturity. And heaven would rather you learn through obedience than through consequence. You have asked God to speak clearly. He has. You asked for confirmation. It came. You asked for peace. It waited on obedience. Now Jesus says the remaining question is not whether you heard, but whether you will finally respond without bargaining. Archangel Michael reveals that your delay has not only affected you. There are connections attached to your obedience. People who receive clarity when you choose truth. Environments that shift when you step into alignment. You are more influential in the spirit than you realize, and that is why heaven has been persistent with you. This was never just about your comfort. It was about assignment. Jesus speaks directly now, and his tone is unmistakable. I am not calling you later. I am calling you now. The reason this feels intense is because the moment is narrow. Not impossible. Not closed. Just focused. Focused moments require decisive hearts. Do not confuse this with fear. Fear scares. This message is sharpening. You are being brought into awareness, not panic. Archangel Michael says heaven has cleared interference so you can hear without distortion. That is why distractions feel weaker right now. That is why this message feels louder than others. It was meant to land. And here is the turning point. The moment you choose obedience, even quietly, heaven responds loudly. Luid unlocks momentum. Surrender unlocks strategy. Jesus says the next instruction will not come until the first one is honored. God is not hiding steps from you. He is waiting for trust. Archangel Michael says if you respond now, you will look back and realize this was the moment everything shifted internally. Not externally at first, but internally. And internal shifts always precede visible change. Take this seriously, but do not take it heavily. Heaven is inviting you, not threatening you. The urgency exists because the opportunity is real. Now, seal this moment. Type "I am listening now" in the comments if your spirit recognizes this call. Blessing code 1440 has just been released over those who respond in obedience. And hear this sacred invitation as the message continues into action. As I speak, I feel the weight of responsibility to carry these warnings to souls who are still asleep, still distracted, still waiting for a sign just like this. When you choose to support this mission through super thanks, membership, or even a PayPal seed found in the description, you are not funding a channel. You are sowing oil into a lamp that must stay lit. The Lord says, "Those who help carry my voice will never lack direction." This is not a donation. It is a prophetic response to what stirred in you just now. Heaven records obedience given in moments like this. I speak blessing over every giver, that your sensitivity increases, that doors open without strain, and that clarity finds you quickly. Do not delay what God is prompting you to do. Move now, and let your seed speak where words cannot. My dear one, as this message continues, the atmosphere shifts again, not into pressure but into revelation. Archangel Michael now stands not as a warning voice, but as a revealer of patterns. He says what you are experiencing is not random confusion. It is the result of living between obedience and attachment. Jesus is opening your understanding now so you can finally see why the same cycles kept repeating, even after prayer, fasting, and asking for mercy. You wondered why some doors never fully opened, even though you felt called. You wondered why peace came in moments but never stayed. You wondered why clarity touched you briefly and then slipped away. Jesus says it was never because you were unworthy. It was because you were divided. Heaven responds to alignment, not intention alone. Archangel Michael reveals that there has been an inner agreement you never consciously made, but slowly accepted. An agreement with delay. An agreement with not yet. An agreement with staying just comfortable enough to avoid confrontation with truth. This agreement did not feel sinful, which is why it was dangerous. It felt reasonable. But reasonable delay still produces spiritual stagnation. Jesus now brings compassion into this revelation. He says, "I see how tired you became from trying to hold everything together. You have been carrying responsibilities, expectations, and emotional weight that were never meant to replace obedience. You tried to compensate for disobedience with effort, but effort without alignment drains the soul." Archangel Michael shows an image of armor worn without movement. The armor is strong, but the soldier stands still. Protection was present, but progress was absent. Heaven equips those who advance, not those who camp in hesitation. This is not rebuke. It is instruction. There is something specific Jesus wants you to understand here. When heaven warns that it may stop trying to reach you, It does not mean God becomes distant. It means God allows the echo of your choices to teach what His voice already explained. Silence becomes the teacher only after instruction is ignored. And this is why this moment still matters, because you are hearing again. You may feel a quiet grief rising as you listen. Not shame, but recognition. That grief is holy. It is the soul realizing how close it came to missing alignment. Jesus says, do not push that feeling away. Let it soften you, not harden you. Soft hearts respond quickly. Archangel Michael now speaks of timing. He says heaven works in season, not endless extension. Grace covers much, but seasons still change. And you are standing at the edge of a transition season that requires decisiveness. What you choose now determines whether you enter prepared or arrive exhausted. Jesus reminds you that obedience does not always feel dramatic. Sometimes it looks like ending conversations you have outgrown. Sometimes it looks like walking away quietly. Sometimes it looks like saying yes before you feel ready. The power is not in the size of the action. It is in the alignment of the heart. This is why your spirit hath been restless. Restlessness is not always anxiety. Sometimes it is the soul reacting to misalignment. Archangel Michael says rest returns when direction is honored. Not when circumstances change, but when posture changes. You are being invited to simplify, not your life, but your response. Stop overanalyzing what you already know. Stop asking 10 questions when one instruction hath been clear. Heaven is not confusing. It is consistent. Your spirit already recognizes the truth being spoken. Jesus now releases reassurance. He says the moment you realign, restoration begins immediately. Not slowly. Immediately. What was put resumes. What felt distant draws near. What seemed unclear sharpens. Heaven does not punish delay, but it does reward obedience quickly. Archangel Michael stands ready, not impatient. He is not moved away from you. He has been guarding the moment you are stepping into now. Protection hath been waiting for movement. Favor hath been waiting for agreement. Peace hath been waiting for surrender. This is not about becoming perfect. It is about becoming responsive. Heaven can work with weakness. Heaven struggles with resistance. And today, resistance is dissolving as awareness rises. As this message continues, the next layer will reveal what changes the moment heaven sees your response, not emotionally, but spiritually. Because once alignment happens internally, the external world has no choice but to adjust. Stay present with this. What is unfolding next will explain why the urgency was necessary, and what heaven is preparing to release once you stop standing still and finally step forward. Beloved one, something subtle but powerful is happening as you remain with this message. Archangel Michael now reveals that the resistance you felt earlier is beginning to loosen. Not because circumstances changed, but because truth has been allowed to enter without defense. Jesus says this is how transformation always begins, not with dramatic action, but with honest awareness. What you are feeling right now is not pressure. It is clarity settling into place. There has been a fear beneath your hesitation that you rarely admitted. The fear that obedience would cost you more than disobedience. The fear that if you fully surrendered, you would lose control over outcomes you have been managing for a long time. Jesus speaks gently into that fear. He says you were never meant to carry the weight of outcomes. You were only meant to carry obedience. Outcomes belong to heaven. Archangel Michael shows a vision of hands clenched tightly around something familiar. Not evil, not destructive, just familiar. He says familiarity can quietly become a substitute for faith. You trusted what you could predict more than what God promised. and heaven understands why. You were trying to survive emotionally. But survival is not the same as alignment. Jesus now addresses the exhaustion you have normalized. He says, you thought this level of tiredness was just part of life, but it was actually a signal. A signal that you have been pushing forward without agreement between your spirit and your actions. When the soul and behavior are misaligned, weariness becomes constant. Rest only returns when integrity is restored. Archangel Michael says something important here. He says heaven does not measure obedience by speed, but by sincerity. This means even now, even after delay, your response still matters. This is why this message continues. If the window were closed, you would feel nothing. But you feel stirring, conviction, and recognition. That means opportunity is still present. Jesus reveals that the moment you stop resisting clarity, instruction becomes lighter. God does not overwhelm willing hearts. He guides them. The heaviness you feared was never obedience. It was the weight of avoidance. Avoidance always costs more in the long run. You may be realizing now that some of your prayers were actually negotiations. You asked God to change outcomes without changing direction. You asked for peace without addressing compromise. Jesus says he listened, but he waited, because peace cannot rest where truth is ignored. Archangel Michael steps forward again, this time with reassurance. He says heaven has not been counting your delays to condemn you. It has been tracking your readiness to respond, and readiness has increased. This is why the message is still unfolding rather than ending abruptly. Heaven does not rush what is finally opening. There is a quiet instruction forming within you right now. It may not be dramatic. It may not involve a crowd or announcement. It may simply be a decision you have avoided making. A boundary you hesitated to set. A direction you knew was right but postponed. Jesus says when you honor that instruction, momentum will follow naturally. This is where trust becomes practical, not emotional trust. Obedient trust. Trust that acts before full understanding. Archangel Michael says heaven reveals more to those who move with what they already know. Revelation follows response. You might be wondering if you missed too much time already. Jesus answers that question directly. He says nothing is wasted when surrendered. Even delay can be redeemed when humility replaces defense. The only unrecoverable thing is continued resistance. And resistance is losing its hold on you now. Archangel Michael says this is the stage where many people turn back, not because they disagree, but because they realize obedience requires release. Release of control. Release of old identities. Release of expectations that no longer fit. But he also says those who continue experience a clarity that makes the release worth it. You are not being asked to fix everything at once. You are being asked to choose alignment over argument. To stop debating what your spirit already recognizes as true. Jesus says agreement unlocks grace. Grace then empowers action. And notice how the message no longer feels like a warning, but like an invitation. That shift is intentional. Heaven warns to get attention, then invites to restore relationship. You are moving from alert to alignment, from urgency to understanding. As this unfolds, something else begins to happen. The voice you once struggled to hear becomes clearer. Not louder, but clear. Confusion fades. Distraction weakens. Focus sharpens. This is what happens when resistance dissolves. Archangel Michael says the next revelation will address what changes externally once internal alignment is restored. Because heaven does not only work within, it responds through circumstances, timing, and divine coordination. Remain attentive. What comes next will explain why this season required such intensity, and how quickly things can shift when obedience is no longer delayed but embraced. Beloved one, as you remain here, something begins to realign not only within you but around you. Archangel Michael now reveals a powerful truth. The moment internal alignment is restored, the spiritual atmosphere around a person responds almost immediately. You may not see it yet, but heaven has already started rearranging things on your behalf. Jesus says this is why obedience feels lighter now, because resistance is no longer blocking the flow. There is a shift happening from inner clarity to outward movement. What once felt stuck begins to loosen. What felt delayed begins to breathe again. Archangel Michael explains that heaven does not move randomly. It moves responsively. When a heart aligns, heaven accelerates. When resistance dissolves, divine coordination activates. Jesus wants you to understand that alignment is not passive. It is not simply agreeing internally while continuing externally on change. Alignment expresses itself through action, even small ones. Heaven notices movement, not perfection. A single obedient step carries more spiritual weight than 1,000 intentions never acted upon. You may notice subtle changes already. Conversations shifting. Opportunities resurfacing. A renewed sense of direction. These are not coincidences. They are confirmations. Jesus says when heaven sees willingness turn into movement, it responds with precision. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is late once alignment is restored. Archangel Michael now speaks about momentum. He says momentum is spiritual before it is visible. When you chose to listen instead of resist, momentum began forming in the unseen. That is why distractions feel weaker now. That is why clarity feels steadier. You are no longer fighting the current. You are moving with it. This is also why you must remain connected. When heaven begins to move, the enemy often tries to reintroduce distraction, doubt, or discouragement. Staying engaged with truth keeps your spirit alert. That is why your participation matters. When you like this message, when you share it with someone who needs awakening, when you comment declaring that you are choosing alignment, you are reinforcing the decision you made internally. You are anchoring it. Jesus says staying connected to this channel is not about loyalty to a platform. It is about remaining in an environment that feeds clarity rather than confusion. Subscribing, engaging, and staying present keeps your spirit sharpened during moments of transition. Do not underestimate how God uses consistent reminders to protect alignment. Archangel Michael emphasizes that many people lose momentum not because they disobey, but because they disengage. They stop feeding what awakened them. They allow familiarity to dull urgency. But you are being called to remain attentive now, because what is unfolding requires awareness. There is something else heaven wants to address. You may feel an urge to rush now, to make up for lost time. Jesus says do not rush, move deliberately. Alignment is not frantic. It is focused. You are not behind. You are repositioned. And repositioning requires clarity more than speed. Archangel Michael reveals that heaven is now creating divine intersections for you. Encounters, information, opportunities that only appear when alignment is restored. These intersections were always planned, but they activate when readiness is present. This is why timing feels sensitive now. Not fragile, but intentional. Jesus reassures you again. He says you do not have to fear missing it now. Awareness has replaced avoidance. That alone changes everything. Heaven does not withdraw once someone genuinely responds. It stays close, guiding each step. This is where discernment sharpens. You will begin to recognize what pulled you forward versus what drains you backward. What once confused you will become obvious. This is not because situations change, but because your posture did. Archangel Michael now gives a gentle warning, not of danger, but of distraction. He says, do not let comfort return too quickly. Sometimes clarity fades when urgency is forgotten. Remember what stirred you here. Remember why this message mattered. Let it continue shaping your decisions. And before you drift or scroll, stay with this, because the next revelation explains how heaven protects those who respond quickly, and what doors begin to open when alignment is sustained rather than momentary. This next portion brings understanding you will be grateful you waited for. Remain present. Momentum is building, and what unfolds next will confirm that heaven did not just speak. You responded, and everything is adjusting because of it. Beloved child, now that alignment has taken root, heaven begins to reveal what protection truly looks like when obedience is sustained. Archangel Michael steps forward again, not with urgency this time, but with vigilance. He says many people misunderstand protection. They assume it means the absence of challenges, but true protection is clarity in the middle of decision. It is the ability to see what others miss, to sense what others ignore, and to avoid what once trapped you. Jesus speaks with calm authority now. He says the reason this message felt intense earlier is because protection was being activated. You were being warned not to scare you, but to position you. When heaven knows a soul is about to step into clearer alignment, it also prepares defense. Not against people, but against confusion, misdirection, and subtle compromise. Archangel Michael reveals that something which once had influence over you has already begun to lose its grip. It could be a pattern of thinking, a recurring temptation, or an emotional attachment that clouded your judgment. You did not fight it directly. You outgrew it through clarity. That is how heaven works. Wrath weakens what confrontation often cannot. You may feel a new steadiness now. Not excitement, not fear, steadiness. That steadiness is spiritual grounding. Jesus says grounding is necessary before expansion. Without grounding, blessing overwhelms. Without grounding, clarity becomes noise. Heaven grounds before it grows. There is a quiet authority beginning to rise in you. Not arrogance, not control, but confidence rooted in alignment. You are beginning to trust discernment again. You are no longer second-guessing every nudge. You are learning to recognize the difference between anxiety and instruction. That distinction will protect you more than you realize. Archangel Michael shows an image of a path narrowing and then widening. He explains that clarity often feels restrictive at first because it removes distractions. But once distractions fall away, the path opens wider than before. This is why obedience initially feels like loss, but later reveals itself as access. Jesus now addresses something personal. He says you have been harder on yourself than heaven ever was. You replayed missed moments, delayed responses, and past hesitation. But heaven does that will where repentance has already softened the heart. Condemnation is now conviction, and conviction's job is finished once obedience begins. Protection also includes restoration of identity. Archangel Michael says part of what was being guarded was how you see yourself. Delay distorted your self-perception. You began to believe you were inconsistent, unreliable, or spiritually dull. That was never the truth. You were discerning but cautious, sensitive but tired. Now that clarity has returned, identity is stabilizing. Jesus says, do not rush to explain this change to others. Let fruit speak. Let consistency speak. Let peace speak. Not everyone needs access to your process. Protection includes privacy. What heaven is forming in you does not need constant exposure. You may notice now that certain conversations feel unnecessary. Certain environments feel loud. Certain influences feel draining. This is not pride. It is discernment maturing. Archangel Michael says, when alignment strengthens, tolerance for noise decreases. You are not withdrawing. You are refining. There is also warning here, gentle but important. Do not romanticize urgency once it passes. Do not forget how close distraction brought you to missing alignment. Remembering keeps humility alive. Humility keeps protection active. Jesus says those who remember are those who remain teachable. Heaven is also preparing you to recognize future warnings faster. This experience has trained your sensitivity. The next time, you will not need repetition. You will respond earlier. That is growth. That is maturity. Archangel Michael says protection is not static. It is responsive. As long as you remain attentive, heaven remains active. You are not walking alone now. You are walking aware. Awareness is a form of covering. As this message continues, the next revelation will show how heaven begins to speak differently once trust is established. The tone shifts. The instructions change. The relationship deepens. Because when obedience becomes consistent, communication becomes more intimate. Stay present with this unfolding. What comes next is not a warning. It is an invitation into a deeper rhythm with God, one that no longer relies on urgency, but on trust. Beloved one, now the tone of heaven changes, and you can feel it. Archangel Michael no longer speaks as one warning from a distance, but as one walking beside you. This is what happens when trust is established. The voice of heaven becomes less urgent and more intimate. Jesus says you are no longer being called to wake up. You are being invited to walk in rhythm. There is a difference between hearing instructions and discerning direction. Instructions tell you what to do. Direction shapes how you live. You are stepping into direction now. This is why your discernment feels sharper and your reactions slower. You are no longer rushed by fear. You are guided by awareness. Archangel Michael reveals that heaven now speaks to you through peace rather than pressure. Earlier, urgency was necessary to break through distraction. Now, peace confirms alignment. You will begin to notice that when something is right, it carries a quiet assurance. When something is wrong, it disturbs your spirit gently but clearly. This sensitivity is a gift that must be protected. Jesus says many people never reach this stage because they only respond to God when they feel threatened. But you stayed. You listened. You adjusted. That matters. Heaven responds differently to those who respond consistently. There is also a responsibility that comes with this closeness. You are now accountable to what you discern. Ignorance no longer applies. But do not let that intimidate you. Responsibility in the kingdom is not burden. It is trust. Jesus would not entrust clarity to you if he did not also provide grace to walk it out. Archangel Michael shows an image of a lamp that no longer flickers. It burns steadily. This represents your spiritual perception stabilizing. You are less reactive, less emotionally swayed, less pulled by every voice. This stability is what allows heaven to speak more precisely. You may notice that your prayers are changing. Less asking, more listening. Less panic, more presence. That is intimacy for you. Jesus says intimacy is built when obedience becomes normal rather than forced. There will still be challenges ahead, but they will not feel chaotic. You will sense when to move and when to wait, when to speak and when to stay silent. This is wisdom developing through alignment. Archangel Michael also reveals that others will begin to sense something different about you. not because you announce it, but because peace carries authority. Do not chase validation. Let fruit speak. Let consistency speak. Let obedience speak. Now hear this clearly. This closeness with heaven must be nourished. It grows through attention, humility, and continued responsiveness. Do not drift back into autopilot. Awareness is the soil where intimacy grows. And before the moment shifts, seal what has been established. Type "I walk in alignment" in the comments if this message confirms what your spirit is experiencing. Blessing code 8881 is now activated over those who respond with obedience and consistency. As this sacred closeness deepens, I feel compelled to speak directly to those whose hearts are burning right now. This message is reaching you because God intends to reach many more through it. When you release support through super thanks, membership, or a PayPal seed found in the description, you are not giving to a person. You are fueling a river of clarity for souls who are still confused, still delayed, still waiting for truth. The Lord says, "Those who sow into my voice will never lack my guidance." This is a prophetic act, not a transaction. Your obedience in giving aligns you with heaven's flow. I declare that every seed released here returns as discernment, protection, and peace multiplied. Do not hesitate. Move as the Spirit leads and let your obedience become part of someone else's awakening. Beloved soul, now that intimacy with heaven has been restored, a deeper layer of understanding begins to unfold. Archangel Michael reveals that this stage is about stewardship, how you carry what God has entrusted to you. Clarity is not only a gift, it is a responsibility. Jesus says what you now perceive must be guarded, not hidden, and used with wisdom rather than impulse. You are entering a phase where discernment replaces urgency completely. Earlier, urgency was necessary to break distraction. Now discernment guides direction. This is why your reactions feel slower, more measured. You are no longer driven by emotional spikes. You are learning to move from inner certainty. That certainty is not loud. It is steady. Archangel Michael explains that many people lose intimacy with heaven because they try to replicate emotional moments rather than sustain obedient rhythms. They chase intensity instead of consistency. But you are being taught something different. Heaven is showing you how to walk without constant signs, without repeated warnings, without dramatic intervention. This is maturity. Jesus speaks directly to your spirit now. He says, "You no longer need to be shaken to listen." That statement alone marks growth. You are learning to hear God in stillness, not just in crisis. This is why silence no longer feels empty. It feels attentive. There will be moments when you are tempted to doubt this calm, to wonder if you have become passive. But Archangel Michael reassures you that calm is not complacency. Calm is confidence rooted in trust. You are not disengaged. You are anchored. At this stage, heaven also begins refining your motives. Not your actions, your intentions. Why you say yes. Why you say no. Why you move forward or pause. Jesus says purity of motive protects alignment more than effort ever could. You are being taught to choose not only what is right, but what is right for this season. You may notice that some opportunities no longer excite you the way they once did. That does not mean they are wrong. It means they may no longer be yours. Discernment does not reject everything. It selects wisely. Archangel Michael says discernment is the ability to recognize what does not belong to your assignment without judging it. This is also where patience becomes powerful. Not passive waiting, but patient obedience. You no longer feel the need to force outcomes. You trust timing more deeply now. Jesus says trust in timing is proof of healed urgency. You are no longer afraid that God will forget you. Heaven is also adjusting how you see resistance. Earlier, resistance felt like failure or attack. Now you recognize it as information. Resistance reveals boundaries. It reveals where grace is not present, and that awareness saves you from unnecessary struggle. Archangel Michael speaks of spiritual economy. He says energy must be invested where heaven is active. You are learning not to overextend emotionally, spiritually, or mentally. Not every request deserves access. Not every problem requires your involvement. This restraint is not selfish. It is stewardship. Jesus now addresses something important. He says there will be moments when you feel unseen again. Not abandoned, just quiet. Do not panic in those moments. Quiet does not mean distance. Sometimes heaven goes quiet because trust has been established. Silence becomes companionship rather than absence. You are also being trained to recognize subtle confirmations. A sense of peace before a decision. A gentle pause before a misstep. A quiet check in your spirit that redirects you. These are not dramatic signs, but they are precise. Precision replaces volume when intimacy deepens. Archangel Michael reveals that your obedience has recalibrated your spiritual senses. You are less vulnerable to manipulation, less reactive to pressure, less confused by conflicting voices. This recalibration will protect you in seasons ahead where clarity will be required quickly. Jesus says, do not underestimate what has shifted. Even if nothing external looks different yet, internal alignment has already changed the trajectory. Trajectories do not always announce themselves immediately, but they determine destination. As this message continues, the next revelation will speak about endurance. Not enduring hardship, but sustaining alignment over time. Because the true test of obedience is not how quickly you respond, but how consistently you remain aligned once the intensity fades. Stay attentive. What unfolds next will teach you how to protect what heaven has restored, so clarity does not fade and intimacy does not drift, but grows stronger with time. Beloved one, this is where endurance is formed, not through struggle, but through consistency. Archangel Michael now speaks with the authority of a guardian who understands seasons. He says alignment that is not sustained slowly weakens, not because heaven withdraws, but because attention drifts. Jesus is teaching you how to remain aligned when emotions settle and life feels ordinary again. This stage is critical. Many people respond powerfully in moments of clarity but slowly relax their posture once the intensity fades. They assume the work is finished because the warning has passed. But heaven never intended alignment to be a moment. It was always meant to be a way of living. What you are learning now is how to carry awareness into everyday decisions. Jesus says endurance is not about holding on tightly. It is about returning quickly. Returning to obedience when distracted. Returning to humility when confident. Returning to listening when busy. You are not expected to be perfect, but you are invited to be responsive. Archangel Michael reveals that small compromises are more dangerous after clarity than before it. Not because God becomes stricter, but because your sensitivity has increased. What you once ignored now affects you more quickly. This is not weakness. It is refinement. A refined instrument must be handled carefully. You are learning to check in with your spirit before reacting, to pause before committing, to listen before speaking. These pauses are not hesitation. They are discernment in motion. Jesus says wisdom often looks like slowness in a world addicted to speed. There will be moments when old habits try to resurface. Familiar thought patterns. Old emotional responses. Not because alignment failed, but because memory lingers. Archangel Michael says, do not be alarmed by this. Awareness dissolves what repetition once reinforced. You now recognize what no longer belongs, and recognition removes its power. This is also where discipline gently enters. Not religious discipline, but intentional living. Choosing what feeds clarity, avoiding what dulls it. You are not isolating, you are prioritizing. Heaven honors those who protect what was entrusted to them. Jesus now speaks about focus. He says focus is the currency of alignment. What you focus on grows. What you repeatedly entertain shapes direction. You no longer have the luxury of feeding confusion casually. But this is not restriction. It is freedom. Freedom from noise. Freedom from unnecessary emotional swings. And in this moment, staying engaged matters more than you realize. When you like this message, when you share it with someone who needs grounding, when you comment declaring that you are choosing consistency, you are reinforcing alignment through action. When you subscribe and remain connected here, you are choosing to stay in an environment that keeps your spirit alert. Engagement is not about numbers. It is about remembrance. It reminds you why this mattered. Jesus says staying connected to truth protects endurance. Many people drift not because they reject truth, but because they stop surrounding themselves with it. Do not let familiarity dull your commitment. What awakened you must continue to feed you. And before your attention wanders, stay right here, because what comes next will reveal how heaven rewards sustained obedience in ways that are quiet, precise, and lasting. This next layer will connect endurance with fulfillment in a way you may not expect. Archangel Michael now speaks of time. He says endurance redeems time. It stabilizes progress. It prevents emotional burnout. Those who endure do not rush ahead and crash. They move steadily and arrive whole. Jesus reassures you that you are not carrying this alone. Grace supports endurance. Awareness sustains it. Heaven walks with those who choose consistency over excitement. This is the stage where confidence becomes quiet. You no longer need constant affirmation. You no longer need dramatic confirmation. You recognize alignment by its fruit, peace, clarity, steadiness. As this continues, the next revelation will show you how heaven prepares fulfillment not through pressure, but through patience. Because what is coming next is not about warning. It is about what becomes possible when alignment is no longer fragile, but established. Stay with this. You will be glad you did. Beloved soul, now you are entering the stage where fulfillment begins to form quietly beneath the surface. Archangel Michael speaks with a steadiness that carries reassurance rather than alert. He says this is the season where many people mistakenly assume nothing is happening simply because nothing feels intense. But heaven often works most deeply when emotions are calm and expectations are no longer shouting. Jesus wants you to understand something essential here. Fulfillment is not sudden reward. It is the natural outcome of sustained alignment. It does not arrive with noise. It settles in with peace. What you are experiencing now is the slow, deliberate construction of stability. And stability is something heaven values deeply because it lasts. You may feel a strange mix of contentment and anticipation. Not impatience, anticipation without anxiety. That is a sign of trust. Earlier, anticipation made you restless. Now it makes you attentive. You are no longer waiting desperately. You are preparing quietly. Archangel Michael reveals that heaven has been testing consistency, not through difficulty, but through normalcy. Can you remain aligned when nothing dramatic is happening? Can you continue listening when there is no pressure pushing you? This is where many drift, not because they reject God, but because they assume the work is finished. but alignment is maintained, not completed. Jesus says this is the season where fruit begins to take root. Not visible fruit yet, but foundational fruit. The kind that does not collapse under pressure. The kind that grows slowly and feeds many. You are being positioned to carry fulfillment without losing clarity. You may notice that your desires are changing. Some things you once wanted intensely no longer hold the same appeal. This is not loss. It is refinement. Heaven is aligning your desires with what it is preparing to release. When desire and destiny align, fulfillment does not overwhelm. It satisfies. Archangel Michael speaks about patience again, but this time with a different tone. He says patience is no longer being demanded of you. It is flowing naturally from trust. You are not forcing yourself to wait. You are comfortable letting timing unfold. That comfort is evidence of healing. Jesus addresses the temptation to measure progress externally. He says, do not rush to interpret silence as stagnation. Roots grow in silence. Foundations form underground. What is being built now is meant to support longevity, not just arrival. There is also a quiet warning here. Do not let familiarity breed carelessness. Just because alignment feels easier now does not mean it requires less attention. Ease is a gift, not permission to disengage. Continue listening. Continue choosing intention. Consistency still matters, even when it feels natural. Archangel Michael reveals that heaven is also watching how you steward peace. Peace is not just a feeling. It is an environment. How you protect it determines how long it stays. Avoid unnecessary conflict. Avoid voices that reintroduce confusion. You are not obligated to re-enter spaces God has already led you out of. Jesus says this is the stage where many prayers begin to change form. Instead of asking for direction, you begin to ask for wisdom in execution. Instead of asking if something is right, you ask how to carry it well. This shift signals maturity. You may also feel a growing confidence, not loud, not boastful, but settled. You trust your discernment now. You are not constantly seeking external validation. This confidence did not come from success, it came from obedience. And that makes it stable. Archangel Michael shows an image of a field prepared for harvest, but still waiting for the right moment. The soil is ready. The conditions are set. Nothing is missing. Timing is the only factor left. And timing belongs to heaven. Jesus reassures you that fulfillment will not arrive late. It will arrive when you are ready to sustain it. Not when you are eager, but when you are grounded. You are closer than you think, not because time passed, but because alignment remained. This is also where gratitude deepens. You may find yourself thankful even before results appear. That gratitude is prophetic. It recognizes what is forming before it is visible. Heaven responds powerfully to gratitude rooted in trust. Archangel Michael says what is coming will not require you to strive. It will require you to stay present. Present in obedience. Present in humility. Present in listening. Fulfillment is not chased. It is met. As this message moves toward its final revelation, the next unfolding will speak about completion. Not an ending, but a sealing. A confirmation of what heaven has done through this process, and what becomes activated when alignment is carried all the way through. Stay attentive. The final portion carries a closing instruction that will anchor everything you have received, and release what heaven has been preparing to place into your hands. Beloved child, this is the sealing moment. Archangel Michael stands now not as a messenger of warning, not as a guardian of transition, but as a witness. He says heaven has been watching every internal shift, every quiet decision, every moment you chose awareness over avoidance. What you have walked through was not just a message, it was a process. And processes in heaven always end with confirmation. Jesus speaks now with a deep stillness that settles over your spirit. He says this is not an ending but an activation. What has been aligned internally is now authorized externally. The reason heaven pressed you earlier, warned you, slowed you, and then grounded you, was because what you are stepping into next cannot be sustained by urgency. It requires stability. You are no longer being asked, "Will you listen?" You are now being asked, "Will you walk?" There is a difference. Listening awakens. Walking establishes. Archangel Michael reveals that something has been officially closed behind you. Not with force, not with loss, but with clarity. The season of repeated warnings has ended. Heaven will no longer need to shout, repeat, or interrupt the same way. Not because God stopped caring, but because you learned to respond. Silence ahead is not absence. It is trust. Jesus says you are now responsible for what you carry. That responsibility is not heavy. It is holy. You carry discernment now. You carry awareness now. You carry sensitivity that will guide you faster than signs ever could. This is why you must guard your inner life carefully. What you entertain will shape how clearly you continue to hear. You may notice something subtle after this. The urge to look back will fade. Not because the past disappears, but because it loses authority. What once pulled at you emotionally will no longer have the same weight. That is completion. That is healing. That is alignment fully integrated. Archangel Michael says heaven has now shifted from correction to cooperation. God is no longer trying to get your attention. He is walking with your agreement. That is partnership. And partnership changes how heaven releases instruction. It becomes quieter, quicker, more precise. Jesus reassures you one final time. He says if challenges arise, they are not signs of misalignment. They are invitations to apply what you have learned. You are not fragile anymore. You are formed. You are not unaware anymore. You awake. Do not rush to explain this season to others. Live it. Let peace speak. Let consistency speak. Let fruit speak. Those who need to know will recognize it without explanation. Archangel Michael now places emphasis on obedience that continues after emotion fades. This is where most transformations fail, but you are being called to remain steady. Not intense. Steady. Heaven builds legacies through steady people. And now, seal this process fully. Type "I am sealed in alignment" in the comments if you receive this completion. Blessing code 9217 is now released and activated over those who respond with obedience and humility. And as this divine sealing completes, hear this final prophetic invitation. What just unfolded was not only for you, it was for every soul heaven is still trying to reach before silence replaces warning. I am carrying this message because God entrusted it to be carried, and you are part of that calling. When you release support through super thanks, membership, or a PayPal seed found in the description, you are not giving money. You are answering a summons. The Lord says, "Those who help my voice travel will never lack my covering." Your seed becomes oil that keeps this lamp burning for the next soul who is still not listening. I speak blessing over every supporter, that your obedience returns as clarity, your generosity returns as protection, and your alignment multiplies. Do not delay what God is prompting. Act now, and let your obedience echo further than your words ever could.